let's transition that to FI money, or FI as you talk about it, financial
Yeah.
independence. Can you define that specifically? Because I know that there are a lot of different terms for people out there, what financial independence means to them, but I know you define that specifically in the book. Could you help us with that?
Yeah. So financial independence, again, is when you have enough money that money is earning enough money to pay for all of your needs. So you are no longer required to trade your labor and your efforts for the money you need to live on. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that once you hit that magic level, you have to quit your job. I've had people say to me, I'm looking at the numbers and I'm financially independent, and that's great, but I don't want to leave my job. I love it. My reaction to that is always, well, you don't have to. I mean, financially independent doesn't mean that you have to quit your job. It just means that you have options. So if you're looking at financial independence, there's actually a mathematical formula that can guide you, because it's not simply a set dollar amount. It's a combination of what your needs are and what your resources are. So for instance, if you need $40,000 a year to meet all of your expenses and what have you, then the formula is 25 times that number. And if you multiply 25 times 40, I'll do the math for you, it's $1 million. So if you have $1 million invested in a low-cost index fund portfolio of stocks and bonds, well, then you are by definition financially independent. If you need $50,000 a year, well, then the amount of money you need is going to be 25 times that. Of course, the other way you can look at it is you can look at the amount you have. And if you're looking at your portfolio and you have $1 million, well, the Trinity study suggests that taking 4% of that a year will allow your portfolio in the vast majority of time to last at least 30 years. And that's become known as the 4% rule. I don't like to think of it as a rule because that sounds too much like a guarantee, but it's a great guideline. And so if you have $1 million, or let's say you have $500,000, well, that means that if you could live on $20,000 a year, you're there. If you need $40,000 a year, you need a little more time to build that portfolio. So you can adjust both those numbers. You can do what you can to lower your living expenses, and you can do what you can to raise the amount that you have invested. And of course, if you lower your living expenses, well, that frees up more of your income to invest. So that's a happy formula.
I think that's great. I think that's fantastic. And when we're talking about the difference between FU and FI money, with FI, what choices, I guess, what lifestyle options open up for someone when they hit FI as opposed to just having FU money?
Well, the big one is you're now in complete control of your time. So you, as I said a moment ago, if you love your job, and a lot of people do, well, you can continue doing that job. And in the back of your mind, you always know that if for whatever reason you get tired of it, you get bored, maybe the boss you love working with goes somewhere else and you get someone you're not so wild about, maybe the company changes hands and the culture changes, maybe your own interests in life change, well, you always have the option of moving on to something else. So that's the flexibility. And of course, if for whatever reason you already don't like your job, well, now you no longer have to do it. And you can either pursue a life of leisure and travel, whatever that means to you. Maybe if it's wandering around the world as a nomad, which a lot of people do, that's great. If it's going off and settling into the countryside somewhere, it's entirely up to you. But you have that option. You can even take the kind of work that doesn't really pay very well, but you find emotionally or psychologically gratifying. So it just opens up a whole range of new options. And in fact, sometimes that's a problem for people because negotiating all of this freedom and all of these potential options can be a challenge in and of itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you get that time freedom, it can almost be a little paradox of what do I do with my extra time? Well, I'm so used to working. Let me do some more work, right? Or
Right.
whatever it ends up being. Now, I guess we're dancing around this term of retirement a little bit, almost with FI and things like that. And I know you have strong views on the term retirement when it comes to these conversations. What are your views on the term retirement? Talk to me about that.
Well, I think people get too hung up on the word. It's just like people get hung up on the 4% rule, and then go through all these convoluted processes trying to figure out, well, is 4% the right withdrawal rate, or should it be 4.8% or 3.2%? Or, I mean, it's just nonsense. It's a guideline. And the same thing with retirement. I guess the classic definition of retirement is that you are no longer working for money. You might be working at hobbies or what have you, and I'm fine with that definition of it. But the other thing that I notice is that when people become financially independent and they decide to leave whatever their job was, very rarely do the kind of people who have the drive and ambition and intelligence to accomplish that, very rarely are they going to sit on a beach and do nothing for
Mhm.
decades. Almost inevitably, they're going to go out and find other things to engage themselves, to engage their minds. And equally, almost inevitably, some of those things are going to wind up throwing off money. They're going to wind up earning money. Sometimes they wind up earning more money than they did in their regular job. And then, are those people really retired? Well, what some have coined the internet retirement police march in and immediately say, no, you're not retired. You're making money doing something else. And I'm like, okay, I mean, who cares? That's why when I look at the acronym FIRE, financial independence, retire early, I like it because it's very clever. I almost never use it myself because the retire early part just seems to make people a little bit nuts. And for me, it was never about retirement. I always liked working. I'm still working in a sense. I'm still writing books and that kind of thing. So, I don't care about whether I'm retired or not. And I tend not to think about it in those terms. And it does tend to hang people up. So you'll always hear me talk about FI or financial independence, but I don't think I've ever in my writing talked about FIRE.
Yeah, I think that's a very good conversation or a good nuance to have because I have chatted with some authors and some researchers just about the importance of having purpose in your life as you continue throughout life. So whether that purpose is travel or helping your fellow community members or just giving back in a certain way, whatever that work is, whether you earn money for it or you don't earn money for it, it's good to have purpose. So having that way to keep yourself busy, to make sure that people are relying on you and you're having a good time and feeling like you have that purpose, it could be a good addition to your retirement, whatever you decide that retirement is, whether that's making money or not making money.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's, purpose is incredibly important to human beings. And a lot of times that revolves around what we typically think of as work, and work's very satisfying. I mean, you mentioned Chautauquas, the
Mm.
retreats that I created. And one of the things that I personally love about Chautauqua is I love traveling, but just traveling to a place as a tourist is much less appealing to me than traveling to someplace cool and exotic for a Chautauqua, where I get to hang out with cool people and have interesting conversations, and there's a purpose behind it. So yeah, I think purpose is incredibly important. And if you reach financial independence and say, well, I'm going to quit my job, and I sure don't want to run afoul with the internet retirement police. So therefore, I'm not going to let myself do anything else other than that's not, purely recreational. Well, I don't know. It sounds like a pretty miserable life,
Yes, the internet is full of opinions. Every time I look in there, there's more and more opinions. Absolutely.
including ours.
Including ours, exactly. We're adding two more today. Absolutely.